Welcome to Saturday Roundtable, where we tell you what our projects are, what we've done in the last week, what we could use help with. This week and 2 weeks ago, we held them at 2 p.m. our Pacific Standard Time, and this will be our last week holding them at this time. But we're here for now. Anyone want to start with what their project is and what they've been up to?
I can start. So the main project I've been talking about here is Reason Score. It's a project to help people find mass agreement on big issues. I'm having a researcher. I'm working with the Society Library, working with a researcher to pull out claims about election integrity, election fraud, and stuff like that. So we'll see how that goes. So that's for Reason Score, and then right now I'm also working on like several other projects. I'm thinking about Conferati with Adriel, which is a crowdsourced kind of organization and government official rating system, a generic rating, crowdsourced rating system that could be used for all those things. And then I'm working on two different startups that I'm not getting paid for, but might make some money in the future. So that's where I'm at.
Cool. I guess I can go next. So my project, or I guess my main one, is WikiLection, which is a platform to fight misinformation in politics, science, and news. It kind of has an offshoot, as Bentley said, which is Conferati, which is the similar sort of idea, but focused on organizations, corporations, projects like ours, that sort of thing. Those are the two main ones. I've been working with another person that shows up to these sessions named Matusz, who's based in Poland, and we've been working together on the prototype for WikiLection, which we have an early version online, and I've been seeing his sort of updates on Upwork, and it looks like he's been putting some time in to add the legislation tracking pieces, so hopefully we'll have that soon. And then pretty soon, the goal is to start another version of the same thing, which will end up being Conferati. So that's where things are for me.
Awesome. My project is solution raising, an hour-long conversation to generate solutions that we could implement now if we had 10,000 people and $100,000. This last week, I held one on science. Jared from Upgrading Society. It was just the two of us having the conversation. It was a really powerful conversation. I enjoyed it. I also signed up for Instagram this week with solution raising. So I'm figuring out how to use their version of TikTok called Reels that is brand new. And so I'm hoping I can find people to hold solution raisings right on Instagram and figure out how to grow that. As well as I had a meeting this morning with Yvette and Carrie, who I'm meeting with on Saturdays, and we were kind of project raising, solution raising together. And then I sat through an MLM pitch. So if only I'd reversed those, it might be a little less in the current space I'm in. But yeah, that is what I've been up to last week. And I don't know if any of us have anything for the hot seat. We can just do what we did yesterday and start talking about everything else besides our.
I mean, I'm sure Adrian and I could probably chat about Conferati.
Yeah, there is also kind of a side project thing that I had brought up before as an option. I've been continuing to work on that, which is the possibility of sort of doing some Game A projects under sort of a Game B umbrella, where the end goal is to start some kind of an organization that would offer these services to companies with the end result of paying for our projects and similar projects and sort of getting an income source for all of our plans.
You're muted, Bentley.
Sorry. Are you thinking of like contracting services or building software and selling that software, or both?
Mostly the building software for the first version, just because to make actually like software from scratch is a fairly large project, especially if it's something that you end up selling. The initial goal was to like base it on something like Salesforce. where it's a much shorter development cycle. There's sort of the existing customer base. And there have been quite a few companies that have started and gotten rather large just from that customer base.
So it's start off building and selling Salesforce plugins.
Right. Yeah, that seems like probably one of the quickest things to market. And I've got a few ideas. And I'm sure that if people dug in, they'd probably spot some potential things as well. But the nice thing is if you build it correctly, then you've got also the theoretical option of a company buying that. And that would sort of be built into the model where either you'd just be making money monthly from the customers, which would then hopefully help pay for our various projects, or would end up just being, if you build something cool enough, Salesforce themselves might buy it, or another company might buy it to add it to their stack. And then I think part of the conversation is around how would that work with, like, if somebody bought the project for, or let's say 10 million, what would go back into the company? What would end up going to the people who sort of worked on speculation on the project, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea, as long as, it might be good to still kind of validate in that space that those ideas are profitable.
Right.
And since it's kind of game A, I don't know that you'd want to have those discussions on something like this, because
true. Yeah, I think
those ideas could be stolen, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think just when you're talking about sort of like trying to start a company, I think any company like this, even if the end goal is sort of game B, omni-win, anti-rivalrous, it'll still have to operate in the game A world. And so I think, to your point, you wouldn't want to be too open, because then competitors can see what you're doing and be like, oh, that is a good idea. We're just going to do that.
So we probably shouldn't go into much more detail than that. I mean, we could definitely talk like governance structure. I mean, list out the kind of guiding principles, which we already kind of discussed some, and then, figure out how equity would work.
Right.
And what would be
less
open.
on what the exact idea is that someone could steal, and also on the like if the purpose is to create a profitable piece of technology that then you're selling for 10 million, like, who is buying that? Like, if it's profitable, that it's actually bringing in money, why not just keep it and have it bring in money and fund projects? And if it isn't bringing in money, like, I'm just not seeing that.
I get you. Ideally, I think you would want to keep a profitable project for things like Salesforce. Part of it is if you identify a need in the ecosystem and sort of you've done it in a unique way, you'll end up with a lot of copycats. And it's also, there's no rules against Salesforce saying that is a good idea and then just doing it. So far, they've tended to buy companies that did cool things just to sort of integrate them in the platform, but that's not a rule. Like, if they offered to buy and you said no, they could just build it themselves. And
that's where, like, having that conversation off camera, if you don't want to share it on here, but like the vision of the technology cooperative and why it, in my mind, like, is so powerful is that it can't really be co-opted by Game A, because, like what we talked about yesterday with like a new restaurant platform, right? That is a saturated marketplace. But if we created one that was cooperative, that was omni-win, that helped the restaurants and the drivers and the customer, you can't really copy that, because you're really just, you know what I mean? You're really just copying.
You need the whole ecosystem and the whole thing. You can't. With something like Salesforce, though, these wouldn't really be game A, or sorry, they wouldn't be like game B ideas. They would be things that you would sell to, it's something that, for example, my work could end up using, right? Or like a big corporation. The question is, do you have an example that's already been made, right? That's already out there. That's already like, this is something made under that now is profitable. They bought like something that would not your idea, but there was a tool that I used in the past through Salesforce called Map Anything, and it basically took the data from Salesforce, because Salesforce is really just like a glorified database with a bunch of cool stuff on top, but at its core, it's just a database, and you could take that information and map it and sort of a bunch of different ways, and it was quite flexible. And I was working in a company that was selling to local governments. We ended up being able to use that in a very useful way. Salesforce ended up buying them. They sort of left the company mostly alone for maybe 6 months or a year, while in the background they were working on taking the pieces of that technology and just integrating it into Salesforce itself. And then now you can buy Salesforce Maps, which is their version of it. It's more expensive and so on, but it's just that technology. But like there were other mapping tools out there, so theoretically Salesforce could have bought those. Or if nobody wanted to play ball, I don't think they had any patents on mapping software. I think a part of it is in these cases, Salesforce is smart enough not to poison their own drinking water by doing sketchy stuff in their ecosystem if they can avoid it, because that will look bad for people like possibly us thinking about starting a project. If you're like, well, why bother? They're just gonna build it themselves, right? Like some people complain at Amazon that does that, where they took the information from the platform and they use it to compete in an unfair way. Salesforce could do that. As far as I know, so far they haven't. And so the goal is to take advantage of that. But you are totally right that if it were profitable, it's not to say that we'd immediately want to get rid of it. Because if you can have a company that actually has some products that are just bringing in money every month, that would be ideal to be able to keep that.
Welcome, Antush. You want to give us an update on your project and what you've been up to?
Hello.
Hey.
Okay. Sorry, my sound is. I didn't hear the last. Sorry, Jubilee, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I was just inviting you to give us your update for the roundtable, what your project is and what you've been up to. And
my project, my personal project is Hyperlogos, and I've no update because I had such a busy week that I just did not write a single line of code for this. I did for the wiki election though, but it's not been uploaded to the repo yet. So before the end of the weekend, it will be. So at least some good news, and that's the update basically. And I've been listening in the conversation in the background, and I joined because it's
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I mean, you are the two of you are the ones who I think it would make the most sense to sort of start that with. I think we'd also want somebody with sort of like a B2B marketing history or background, because I mean, I've had these ideas in the past. I've never been good at marketing. I've talked to people who seem to like the ideas, but that's a definite skill set to actually take the idea, craft some messaging around it, and how to actually position it in that space, that whole thing.
is there anyone who's actually good at that? And I don't mean like, of course, like there's people who market themselves on like Instagram and you know what I mean? They become influencers, they have tens of thousands of people, but they're really like, they're the brand.
Right.
Is there actually people who can naturally market technology and those kind of projects without just ad revenue, right? Just like putting money into Google ads and Facebook ads to get you to see it, to do, which is still a skill, but like
yeah, there's content marketing and growth tactics. So there's a whole industry for people that do that.
The issue is that they're very like, if you're good at it, you're incredibly in demand in Game A, because that's really that's what a lot of Game A companies are built on. Is the messaging and the positioning and the being able to sell that product. And if you hire somebody who sucks, you're just going to flop. If you get somebody good and actually take off, that person usually ends up making some pretty good money in Game A. And so that's the challenge: is how do you get somebody good to come over and, in theory, on this kind of a project, you'd sort of be working on spec. Which, to be fair, that part is actually kind of normal. Like in a startup world, a lot of people do work on spec.
No, we'd also, and that person, it'd be best if they're Game B, because otherwise they wouldn't join, because they're not going to make as much money, potentially. So I think it'd be a good thing to put a call out to the Game B community and see if there's anyone who has, marketing, growth, or skills and wants to contribute to a Game B.
Alejandra? I think somebody had joined a session recently where somebody else had mentioned that they were a marketer. I was like, oh, interesting. I think it was Alejandra from, I think it may have been during Mark's session. It's Mark, right? Mark Campbell? Yeah. Yeah, so I think
Yeah, I
Alejandra.
mean, yeah, right. So she was on the thing. Yeah, I would still kind of suggest putting a call out to the whole community. There's
Yeah, see if she's interested. And I'm not sure what she was used to marketing. It is sort of a specific niche that you'd want to be, because like
yeah,
B2B marketing is a specific thing where you have to be able to talk to organizations in their language and sort of make them interested.
yeah. Growth marketing is different from marketing, where you just like,
Yeah.
I'm going to put this ad on television. That's
Right.
a different thing. So, yeah, but I guess these would be game A ideas that we're hoping to fund game B. I mean, it'd be nice if we could figure out some game B philosophy that would be useful in Salesforce, but since Salesforce is pretty game A.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if just the nature that it's fairly expensive, so in order to afford it, you kind of got to be a profitable.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to, like, I think they have their whole 1% things, and one of the 1% that they give is they give their product free to nonprofits, but that's only for 1% of their sort of overall their business. But yeah, they're like in general, they're very sort of geek. They themselves are a game A company, and almost all their customers are game A. But I think one of the things that we could talk about now, as we sort of hinted at, was this structure of, so if we have, either the game ideas that I have in mind, or if somebody here has their own, or just if somebody, were to come in from the outside, and maybe they had explored the game A investment models, and they're like, nah, I don't really like that. What would that look like? Because odds are the first project wouldn't do that. The first project will be incredibly on spec, like even more so than normal, because the organization doesn't really exist yet, and we're kind of doing a project where if it sells or if it takes off, it would be able to fund that and start to give that organization some resources. So in theory, the first project or the first couple would probably end up where the people making it will have more equity in the project than normal. Because in my mind, one of the end advantages to this is if you have a game A project idea, you can take that to game A now. I mean, that's the same way it's been for a while. But there's sort of that, how do you fund it? Do you fund it yourself? Do you go get investors? Like, that's kind of a fairly major issue in that world. Whereas if you were to offer, hey, if you want to come offer it on this platform or through this organization, we help alleviate a lot of that startup issue. And really, it's just about, you would be doing a job to help get this launched. You'd be doing it on spec, but you wouldn't be taking the same amount of risk as normal. So you would get something out of it, but not like game A numbers.
Well, yeah, so I have some thoughts on how to calculate that. And there's lots of discussions on how to do that. But I would think that the main thing that we'd want to make is a healthy salary, right? So we want to be able to support ourselves. So I would say that we kind of figure out what, and not so much even based upon like what you bring or the revenue, because we're not revenue focused. So everyone needs to earn a living, as long as the rest of the people think they're providing some value. Some people are going to be more, provide more profit than other people, but it's hard to calculate. And it's actually impossible to calculate. Anyways, it's always been wrong because CEOs make billions of dollars. And it's not like if he died, the company wouldn't lose billions of dollars, right?
Right.
So, so I was thinking, so we kind of figure out, so one idea is you kind of figure out what the ideal salary, like in the United States, the ideal salary for happiness is about $70,000 a year, $75,000 a year, depending on your location. So just kind of figure out what that is for your location and whatever currency you have, since we have Martouche on here, and we have US dollars, Canadian dollars, and Martouche's currency. So, and then I'd still like to have the flexibility, like, I may not work on this all the time, so maybe do it by a week. I'm at 50% this week, I'm at 10%.
Right.
I'm doing 0 for this week because I'm working
Right.
on other projects. Tally all that up. Maybe if you're not getting paid immediately because we don't have a revenue, maybe you get 2x whatever that salary was because you're taking the risk. But once you get that paid back because we got revenue, then it's not there. And it doesn't come to you. And then after that, all the excess money goes into funding salaries for Game B projects, right? So
Right.
then if you want that, you just work on one of the Game B projects as opposed to
Right.
just getting it handed out. And if the company sells, I don't think it's even that people have equity in it. That goes in the pot for funding Game B projects, right?
Yeah, that's largely what I had in mind. I was thinking of like, at least for the start, a little bit more of a pinch of Game A, especially if we're ideally hoping to compete with people, who have an idea, they can approach Game A or this. And if the pitch of this is, hey, we're going to take away a lot of your risk, and you aren't going to have the same multiples that you would at Game A, but like you might be able to get X% of either the revenue, or like if it actually ends up selling the full project, you would get a slice, but a much smaller slice than you would in Game A because you didn't do this yourself. That's kind of the whole.
Yeah, I just don't think mathematically you can get that to work out better than a Game A company. So
Oh yeah, no. The goal would not be to like even really try to compete like numerically with Game A, because they're also going to be offering amounts that we just wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
I guess like if this was a project where if you manage to get your investors and if you got all your ducks in a row, you might be able to sell it to a Game A company for 100 million. In this case, you might sell this project for, I don't know, 10 or 20. And then the question is, how would that get sliced up? I think part of it, and like a relatively small portion, would end up going back to the first staff, all the staff overall, and sort of that. But most of the money, like probably 80% or more, would stay in the company. And so it's the company growing, but then also paying its staff well. I think that's the number one thing that everybody on this call would agree with is once it actually starts employing people, those need to be like proper wages, like actually comfortable. And I was actually thinking in North America for it to be 80,000.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
I'd sign up for that. I'd sign up to get the 80,000. One of the ideas I had previous to Together Tech or for Together Tech was similar to what we do with our Canadian politicians, but not like where they serve for 4 years on the board and then you get a lifelong salary. So not a $80,000 lifelong salary necessarily. Let's say if you spend a year, that's 20,000. Now that you can't live off of 20,000, but if you add it to all the salaries you're making, my suggestion would be that if you're creating a fund that people can apply to get a living wage from to be able to work on their project, that the people that work on this project get that committed for life. So they are the first, like, if you know what I mean, it was the four of us doing it. We would get $80,000 once it hits a certain amount per year, or once it's sold for a certain amount. We would, for in perpetuity, getting 80,000 every year, even if we never worked again, right? Because we worked on that, and then whatever's left is like other people can get funded as well.
Right.
But that is the thing, that you're taking a risk, but you're going to get a salary forever.
Exactly. Yeah, I think either that, or if that was harder to do, at least to start with, just saying like, oh, these people on the startup crew who work on spec get like probably somewhere between 5 to 10% of like either the net profit or the sale value sort of divided amongst them, and then another slice divided up amongst all the actual staff. Because if you get to the point where you've sold it, like if we were to make a Salesforce app that let's just say sold for 10 million. So, at that point, we would already have staff like actually doing developers and probably customer service, and I think they should get a slice as well, not a huge one. Like it's not normal profit sharing, but it's enough that it's like you contributed to this, so you definitely get a part of it. And then it's also the people that worked on spec. Like that is something where if you do that in Game A and the project takes off, you can make a lot of money. Like you can make tens of millions of dollars. I don't think that we're trying to get those numbers. Sorry about that.
So my concern is that anytime you introduce you can get tens of $1 million, you are incentivizing Game A.
Right.
So I would not want to have that at all. Now I do like the idea of the universal, the basic income idea. So the way I would think about putting that is maybe it is a percentage of the revenue or the sale, not the revenue, a percentage of the profits or the sale up into your salary, right? So if the company's making enough money, then you continue that. The company can't guarantee salaries if it ends up making if it
Right.
falls down. So yeah, maybe it is, I have, 1% ownership of the company up into my salary.
Right.
And then I get that on whatever the pay, monthly or bi-monthly or whatever, the every 2 weeks
I,
or whatever.
I kind of like that, because then if you were to like still be employed by the company, you'd be getting your actual salary plus this bonus of like.
Well, no, I would, yeah, I guess that's a problem I hadn't thought of. I still don't think anyone should have any way of making more than their salary.
Whereas
As a
I
philosophical
think
statement.
there should be a standard thing, but there is like, if we're working on spec, there's a decent chance that it goes nowhere, and you just spent that time. If it floats off into the ether, I think there's also,
if it's delayed, you get 2x maybe. So that was the one thing, but it's finite. It's not. I think if you make it to where well, I don't know. You do want an incentive.
I think there's
to make
also
sure it works,
a very different, like the first project to take part in this, where really the organization is providing nothing. It's the people working on spec who are actually doing the work, and then if it sells or if it makes money, they're the ones then using that to say, okay, now this mostly goes to the company so that it can start doing this for other projects.
I think there are a lot of projects out there that do governance on how to divvy up equity in organizations like we're looking to. So maybe it'd be better to spend a little time finding an existing resource and then adapting it.
Yeah,
rather
possibly.
than bouncing ideas back. I was just trying to think. I just saw one the other day where they have a process for doing this, but I don't remember.
Okay,
what it
cool.
was.
Yeah, go ahead, Matish.
Protocol.love, the thing we are talking about. Like the way I imagine it, at least, is for if there's a company and it does projects, and it can be very well measured how much the project is bringing of revenue to the company. Then everyone involved is or would be getting part of it, like a dividend from this particular project. And the way to visualize it is something like the protocol.love did, as far as I am aware, at least, as far as I imagine how it works, is you have this like streams of value, and it's like pipes, like an aqueduct. So whenever revenue comes in, it's automatically divided into whoever put most work into the project. And it's not to say that there should not be a cap on how much everyone is getting or can get. If someone was involved in 10 very profitable projects, it's probably it's not fair, but it might not be wise to just enable people to earn like CEOs of the companies do. So yeah, the idea is everything establishes within the company like streams and riverbanks where value is just flowing through the system, and everyone can tap into like some project and then get a share out of the project's revenues. And that could possibly replace salary as such. I mean, to the extent of if the salary is 70 or 80, if someone has enough projects done for the revenue from the projects to exceed the 70 or 80 per year, then the person would get no salary, right? Just be using the revenue from the projects. And it would be something like the passive income, though I'm not sure at this point what would happen after with the person's time. If the person was involved in more projects,
Right.
You know what I mean?
I definitely like the idea of staff being able to get a passive income through this. Like, I definitely want the founders to as well. But like, if you worked at the company for 5 or 10 years and you absolutely contributed to the value, I think it would be cool if you had, you know, like X% of your either of your salary or like, you know, a certain percentage of the projects that you participated in. As long as those projects are live and making money, you get a cut of that profit. And so if you work in a project for 5 years and then you take a year off, you might still be making, you know, 10 or 20% of your wages during that time, even though you aren't working.
It sounds also like like, are we building it for Game A, selling it, and then building something like Together Tech from that funds in there for, or if we're keeping the company, like there's something. If a project has to be profitable for you to be able to get the money, then we're in Game A.
Well,
because the point is for some of them to fund ones that aren't necessarily profitable but have a huge impact, right? They would have currency, but they're not profitable.
Yeah. I think in the end, my end goal would be that it would like you'd be working for the company and not necessarily on specific projects. So like if you're a marketing person for this company, you might do a bit for these, you know, these B2B projects, but then you might also do some work for WikiLection and for Reason Score and for Hyperlogos and for a bunch of this sort of as those projects need help. And then the company overall would have some sort of profit sharing with the staff. So like, because also if you've got the for-profit side, it's really hard / impossible to measure the advantage that side gets off of being tied to something like Reason Score and Hyperlogos and WikiLection, where there's sort of that like, oh, people like it because it's doing good. I want to do business with that company because it's helping. It would be impossible to measure that. So I think you would sort of assume that you are getting something out of it, and it would end up being kind of equal, where like the staff overall, everyone shares the profit of everything, which I think is one of the weird things about something like Mondragon, where they do profit sharing with the staff, but they sort of do it based on that line of business. And so if you're working in like a tech company where you can end up being way more profitable, those people can make a lot more money than somebody, you know, in production. But you're like, yeah, but they're still making stuff that we need. So even though they aren't as profitable, like we still want that person to be happy and be doing that work, and we want to keep doing that line of business, even if it's, you know, got zero profit motive.
My brain is slightly overloaded, so I may not be making this clear. But there is a shift in the optics here from, you know, in the normal company, you have to just work and run, and the goal is to make profit always, and just this is the goal. In Game B case, it's more about there's stuff to be done, and it just needs to be done, and regardless of all the projects and solutions we're talking about, they are about real things that need doing. And it would make sense that people who do some of them establish themselves like a revenue stream enough to serve as a salary on one hand, and then be free to work on other stuff that needs doing, and apply that creativity and freedom of being creative and not having to just run to other projects and make them work. And in doing so, they would be just, and it's not necessarily like a linear thing. Like 10 projects bring 80,000 and 20 projects bring 160. It would be rather like, no, maybe logarithmic, something like this. But
yeah, we'll probably end up with the Pareto distribution, where you'll have, you know, 20% of your companies making 80% of the money. But it's not to say that the other 80% of the companies that are making the 20%, or, you know, zero if that's not their emphasis at all, like those will still have a use like to the real world, where it's like if something like Reason Score takes off, that's going to be insanely useful. And even if it's not making a profit, we're like, yeah, but we still want it. Yeah. And I guess my point was that there also is still a use if we have a for-profit side that's tied to something like Reason Score, where there might be people like us who work, in game A companies, where we're like, I heard these guys talking about this technology, and that sounds cool. If I have to choose between them and this other company that I don't like, I'm going to choose them because they're also doing other cool things. Or it might end up being one of the differentiators that actually makes the for-profit side more profitable, and it's the fact that there's a non-profit side.
So
Well,
I
the
like-
coolness, sorry, the coolness factor is not necessarily measured in profit it brings.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I was thinking maybe the protocol.love I think is a great place to start to help us with all that, and they do have a free 1 hour consultation, and then we could talk to them about whatever equity in the business that then they could continue with if they think it's likely to work.
Protocol.love is Raymond, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, when I say that, I mean him, but
Yeah.
probably, yeah. But so I think we should reach out to him and say, hey, let's take your 1 hour consultation. Let's do it live and be transparent in one of these meetings, or schedule a different one, and
Right.
see if we can work with him to figure out what to do, and if we can convince him to help us out later if we think we need it, or if we figured it out by then, you know, whatever.
I'd
See
be
how it
interested in
goes.
that and seeing what that model looks like.
Because we brought up a lot of good ideas, but I think he's put a lot of thought into it, and he could probably get us there a little faster.
Right.
So who wants to head that up, Adriel?
I have a connection, like Raymond and I were working on process raising, so
Yeah.
I think I have a connection. I can ask him if he'll come and work with us at Together Tech to work through. But Adriel, if you want to write out like more of the what we're doing, because I'm not great at explaining that, that was basically what Raymond and I were doing.
Yeah.
We're figuring out
I mean,
how to
I think
decode what solution raising is and stuff.
so like the short form is sort of how do we do something like Together Tech, where you have a for-profit side and a non-profit side. How does that work? Just
No, I
in
get
general.
that. I need you to
All
type
the
it
other-
out.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
Like
would
the
specifically
actual-
say our plan is to start by selling Game A products, specifically Salesforce plugins, is our start, to give them an idea of what we're doing. But we want it to be a Game B organization, and we want the profit to go for Game B initiatives.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as Game B as can reasonably be assumed, given that we haven't even defined it yet.
Yeah, it's like the faucet, whatever that word is pronounced. In Ethereum, when you want to do something on the testnets, you have this those special ways of getting some free Ethereum for just testnets, and yeah, what we need is something like this with real money coming in to create the first stream of revenue, so it can be then made into a the streams and rivers of resource of power, powering up the enterprises that will be created along the way. So.
And in the protocol.love, he has concepts for impact currency, equity currency, influence currency, and then currency, right? Actual dollars in whatever currency you're in. So, so I think that'll all kind of help out. Because, we'll be, and I really like the idea of some sort of basic income, but also getting paid to work on the non-profit stuff, the Game B non-profit. So, open to all that, I guess.
Yeah, there is usually, it's not like there's stuff that is completely non-profit, just not everything is measured in profit as understood in Game A.
And as we're going through finding Game B solutions like Conferati, that's going to be very Game B, and that may be able to, I mean, its intent wouldn't be make profit, but it could be making some profit that would spin off for other projects if there's enough community desire and support for that. So we could quickly transition from, Game A to Game B stuff as soon as we can figured out
Right.
and find a a financially sustainable model for it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll drop the sort of overall question that probably won't get too deep into it, but just to like, how does that work? How does that?
Yeah. And really, I guess, Jubilee, I was thinking it's really just if he's interested, get him interested enough to have a meeting, or give him enough information to where he would like to officially do one of their consultations.
Knowing Raymond, literally all we have to do is invite him.
Yeah.
Be like, hey,
That's what I was
live
thinking.
online, radical transparency, come talk protocol.love.
Yeah.
And as long as he's available, he will.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's
That's
gonna
what I
make
was
that.
thinking. It's not a big pitch, but
No.
yeah, to give him.
Which I love Game B for that reason. Like,
Yeah. You could also probably just send them this video, actually.
yeah.
Watch us brainstorm and
That's background,
stumble
yeah.
around.
Yeah. And like, to me, this sort of ties back to, I think it was last week that Jubilee had mentioned, like the housing thing, where it's like, you're starting off to build housing to hopefully get some rent to pay for more housing. Ideally, I'd want this to actually be the exact same thing, where it's like, that's one more thing that this company is doing. And then you can use the money from these projects to also help buy homes and house people and then get rent. And then you're like creating this self-sufficient organization that's not parasitic as it is with a lot of the Game A ones, where like its job is just to exist and make money. We're like, in this case, the job is to exist and make money to be able to do these other cool things, and the money doesn't actually end up in one particular person's pocket.
Which is one of the cool things about, like, if let's say we do live in a world where we've got this pool of money, we've started paying ourselves $80,000 a year. That's awesome, but it's also not like super wealthy, right? 80,000 is not. And there's a beautiful part of Game B and creating things that are omni-win that, right, like there's a pool of money. We're taking out 80,000, that's taking actual currency out. But if we're also creating solutions that are like, and you get your house, right? Like your like Together Tech or whatever pays for your rent, right? Like it's not me paying my rent of $1,000. It's the company that we're working for paying for it.
Right.
And you're getting 80,000, right? Like there's ways, and that isn't necessarily omni-win because you have to actually have a physical building and like you can't house everyone. But like it doesn't mean you have to take $1,000 out of the 80,000 to pay for rent. Like there's ways to create omni-win solutions that are solutions that everybody gets, right? Where it's like, right, and even if you don't work for us, you can come get one of the houses and pay $1,000 in rent, which is cheaper than you have, and it goes into the pool. And if you work for us, you also get your rent covered, and there's ways to bring down that cost.
Yeah, or it's subsidized. Like, yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do. And the interesting thing is, I think if the company got big enough, that's the point where, like, even if you were just paying your staff's rent, like if Amazon were to start doing that, they have some weight that they could throw around to kind of get a better deal on a lot of the stuff. Because we're Amazon, like either deal with us or we'll deal with you.
Yeah.
And not quite in an Amazon way, because they can maybe not be always nice, but that basic idea where it's like, and I think that would end up being a weirdly uncomfortable thing for a lot of people in this, is it would need to act like a Game A company in a lot of ways, especially when it's actually dealing with Game A companies. But then that one last extra piece, it's like, yeah, but that profit isn't going into shareholders. It's going into the company, going into paying staff, going into like run, hopefully like everyone agrees that a company should be run to be omni-win, anti-rivalrous.
There is one interesting aspect to this. For people who earn $1 billion, or something like the crazy amount of money, the responsibility to use it in a meaningful way is on them entirely. And even if they have like very good ideas, it's still it's something very different from what, for example, we would be doing, earning just a reasonable amount, but having influence over potentially something very big and powerful that is the Together Tech. And it would be something like participating in and being able to steer something that can really do big things.
Yeah.
But not having to own it and not having to be personally responsible because of being the only owner of the thing. So
it's like having some control over a company like Amazon, but not being like Jeff Bezos, where you're like
Yeah.
kind of the main person. Like, A, that's a lot of weight on his shoulders, but B, he also gets a crap ton of money and power and stuff because of it. If you've got the like kind of best of both worlds, you've got this company that like, if he decided tomorrow that Amazon should start being a power for good, he could change the world overnight. Like,
Yes.
and it's having that kind of power, but like spread amongst the group so that you can't just decide the day after, actually, no, I do want that money.
It's like, yeah, being a god is difficult because you don't have the. No, I've been watching lots of videos about sense making, and the picture that emerges from the information is that for the real sense making, you have to not be alone in doing this, because
Right.
you don't have any reality checks in place in form of other people who actually, when you are being too like gaudy, and you think, okay, I'm going to fix the world by creating an army and getting rid of all the bad guys, for example. And no, it's not possible. And someone needs to tell you this, and someone who potentially has also the power to not be just dismissed, but have real
Right.
influence.
Yeah, for it to be an actual conversation where there has to be buy-in from sort of, enough people that it can't just be one person.
Yeah.
But like, it could be, a board of, let's say, 10 or 20 people that sort of make a lot of the larger decisions, but that has to be in context of the organizational charter. And then, there would be some capacity for, if somebody just really isn't doing the right things, the members could vote them out at any point in time, which kind of goes into the liquid democracy type thing.
Yeah, and from there, that was part of the, like, if you're on the board and then you get voted out, and it's like, great, so I put all my time and energy and I get voted out, now I don't get my salary, but I get my long-term salary. There's something cool about, right, if you're not on the board, if you're a founding member and you got that residual income, I don't know what else to call it, an actually ethical residual income,
right?
Then you that it doesn't really matter if you get voted out, so you're also not really there. Like, you are there to help the people, but you also are going to want to speak to your own heart and soul, right? Like I'm not going, like, if you want me to make a decision that's not mine, right, this isn't about my salary. So it works both ways. And the more open and transparent we can be with those board meetings, I think the better, because there is also a powerful, like, Game A and government, Game A corporations and governments can come to you and basically demand you're out of the marketplace or buy you out or do very shady shit. But if you're like, you literally can't, you have to do it in front of all of our members. Like, there is no behind the thing meeting, because
exactly.
the board is showcasing everything. And if there's something behind closed doors, it is very clear why and how that is. And it's like, and the board, like, the members even are like, no, we're not okay with that being back behind the door. Sorry, you can't have that meeting. Or yeah, you can, because we get that there needs to be a bit of of that there. But there's a lot of power that happens in a tech company we own together that operates transparently. Like, that's the entire Together Tech.
And especially if it's international. We're like, hey, Mr. Government, that's great. We'll change, at worst, we'll change our rules in your country, or we'll just stop offering it, and then you can deal with the voters who are mad at you now because you kicked us out. We're going to keep offering
being a global tech cooperative.
Yeah, like, where it really is being like Amazon for good. That level of power, but
I was just saying, isn't this pretty much Together Tech, or just a different kind of,
in my mind,
down it, or do you see it being different, Jubilee, in your mind?
I mean, whichever comes up and makes it. Yeah, if we just name things other things, that's fine, right? For the meantime, but
it's close enough to your original vision, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think at its core, it's definitely a technology cooperative. Like, that part is, I think we're all in agreement, and we're talking about like how the specifics would work and what you could end up doing with it. But yeah, in my mind, this is quite close to Jubilee's original.
We're just agreeing to start Game A, which was probably not a hope for the original Together Tech, but
in my mind, it's like, if we can do it, that's a much shorter journey. Because then instead of like each one of us begging for change in this, you can just show up with how Game A works, where you're like, yeah, we have something that's generating money, and now we can buy attention.
Yep. Good point.
That changes.
Freeing people from Game A is the point. So if, like, what you do first is create a Game A corporation that frees people from Game A, the more you free people who really want to be freed to do the greater good, not because, oh yeah, I want a ton of money so I can do the greater good. There's a very big flip there. Like, ooh, if only I was a millionaire, then I can be Bill Gates, then I can put time and energy into what I want. Because yeah, I would love that. At the same time that it's your ideas and your, like, it's very hard to see the things that need to change when you're a millionaire and you're like, oh, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. You should too. It's like, no, you didn't.
I think that also goes
didn't.
back to what you were saying, where then that opens you up to the government's coming to you directly if you're the one in charge and saying, yeah, no, you have to stop that. They theoretically could do that if it's just you, but if it's all the members, it's hard to do that silently. Psst, all the members, the company has to do this, or we're gonna, I don't know, do something in just our country, but then you'll tell others, crap, we can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, game B cannot be created outside of game A anyway, because it would be equal to going off grid, which for some people is ideal, and that's what they want. So they built a little place in the woods, owned by a nation state or some other corporation, and it just doesn't work on any other scale greater than the singular one family, one unit, small village thing. I think Mondragon might be an exception, but exception proving the rule. So yeah, there has to be a bridge between the game A, because it owns all the resources, and the goal is to bring resources to do good and convert them kind of to game B. Just use them.
Totally. Yeah. And I think
it's for, I just want to speak to Mondragon specifically. Like, I love Mondragon. I'm obsessed with Mondragon. At the same time, they are workers cooperative, and they started in the 60s. And although I want our workers, we're the workers, I want us to be able to live a living wage. There's a very different incentive for worker cooperatives, right? To create something that you want to work at that pays you a living wage versus a consumer cooperative. I'm sorry, there isn't a better name, but a consumer/platform cooperative where we're creating it for the people themselves, because then it's not like, I just saw there is this new gaming, like the people who are working in gaming creating a worker cooperative, and I'm like, great. And I would try any game that came out of a worker cooperative. At the same time, are you going to not buy the new game because it wasn't done by a worker cooperative? No, you're not. And so you're not going to necessarily use your voting dollar to support, you know what I mean, like a game because it was done by EA and they paid their people horribly. Like, no, you're still going to buy the game. Right? Like, come on, we buy iPads and they're bought with slave labor. That's very different.
Totally. Yeah, I think, but if that's successful, that shows that can work, and then you get more, and then you might end up with the case where, like, well, I've only got $80 at hand. I can either buy the EA game or this game. I want to try both. I want to buy the game that's not EA.
Absolutely, but that's
that's
usually also not what you do with games, though. You watch other people play them online, and then you
Yeah, no, it's true. But I think with all this, one of the big things is if we're planning on outcompeting Game A, that means that we have to play Game A, not by their rules, but we're in that arena still.
And that's what I'm saying is worker cooperatives are awesome. They're very socialisty, left wing, but they aren't going to outcompete Game A. Consumer cooperatives that are done with that aren't just mech where you're like, yeah, I would love that you use the non-slave labor, but I'm not actually going to buy my stuff there because I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go down the street. If there's a way to see, well, why aren't you? Because you're a member of this. Why aren't you buying it here? How can we create this? How can we do those things within the tech space? Because that's where a lot of the power and resources are.
How does mech work with profits? Do the profits just stay in the company?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know with Mondragon, they pay out their staff.
I'm sure they might have a dividend that's paid to the staff, but they're not a worker cooperative. Just like Van City is not a worker cooperative. They are consumer cooperative.
Right.
They're there for, and Van City's a good, so their profit goes a lot to the community. It also goes, so you only get one share, one vote. You can't get more of a vote for who the CEO and who the board, or you don't get to vote in the CEO. The board of directors are who hire the CEO. You only get one vote, but based on how much money you have in mortgages, how much money you have in term deposits, you get a different dividend than the people for the profit. So you get, part of that. And a certain percentage goes to that, and a certain percentage, like staff, again, it's not a workers cooperative, but they are one of the best places to work.
Right. Okay. That is one of the things that I'm like trying to figure out how this would work, is I think for it to be successful, it kind of needs to be self-sustaining. So as much of the profit as possible, it just has to stay within the company to help it grow and to be able to buy more stuff. Like, if the goal is for eventually to be able to buy apartments and land to be able to house people, that requires a lot of money. And that means, keeping as much of it as possible, but still like paying proper salaries and anything else to sort of make it be competitive and, do its thing. But in the end, what one of its number one jobs is to grow so that it can compete in a game A world with a different set of rules, of course. But
which is like, I get it. We've had many of a conversation on this, but that is a very game, like the growth in that we need to be profitable. Like it's very easy to co-opt that in a game A way.
Oh, yeah.
What we're doing is increasing the impact. That's the difference between, we all need 5,000 extra dollars versus we all figured out how to live off of 5,000 less.
Right.
Is like that 5,000 less gets passed on to everyone, whereas the 5,000 more we have to then figure out how to pay it. You know what I mean? Like they're
right.
very different. And so looking at the perpetual growth, like, how much of the corner of the market did we get versus how much are we impacting people's lives? How much are they enjoying being part of this as a consumer, as a member, as a worker, you're working here, you must be happy. We're a great place to work, but like, what would make you happier? Like, what would improve this for you? What isn't working? What is, and growing that way? Like, I agree we have to grow, but there's a different metric for growth. It's like impact growth.
Yeah, and I think your point is an important one. It's really easy to co-opt that and let it get out of control, and then it just ends up being game A with a different name. You're like, it's still bad. We still can't. But like, if it ends up being sort of profit seeking, but not just for the sake of profit, like it's to fund other things, and it's in line with the company, the rules and the charter, all that type of thing. But yeah, I can see how that would. Like that would need to be fairly rigid because that could get out of control fairly quick. And then you're like, why do we do all this again if it's just the same problem? But
that's also one of the good things about not if we're making something that's profitable and selling it for $10 million, there's nothing wrong with especially that it's the beginning stage to do something else. But when there's 4 people, you will absolutely sell it for $10 million, even if it's going to create game B. So you each get 2.5 million, right? It's very different if there's 10 million members. Well, we're not for $1. I'm not going to make that decision for $1. It's the impact I'm here for. And game A can't co-opt the impact when it's spread out that far because you can't offer enough that I'm going to sell my soul.
Exactly.
But like $1 million for me, maybe. Sorry?
Said they can't bribe us all.
An interesting challenge will also be that if you're making a profit, one option is to lower your prices, right? So then anytime that you're making a profit, it's kind of like, well, the people that are paying for the products could be getting it cheaper. So we have to decide, okay, then is this kind of a tax on the product so that we can create good elsewhere? So I forgot whenever we kind of do these things is that determining the price is a difficult thing because every dollar more than you need is kind of
that you can get out of OmniWin pretty quick if like.
I think though, but that's also when it's spread out, right? Like you hear, like it's like, well, we can't afford to pay McDonald's workers more. Well, they do it in Europe. What the freaking hell are you talking about? And the people buying them are like, you know what? I'm willing to pay an extra 25 cents for my burger, but McDonald's, you know what I mean, won't do it. Right. We're not necessarily willing to pay. There's a percentage we're willing to pay, right? And so if that restaurant one we talked about yesterday, we see the OmniWin. Now, yes, we might vote to make to figure out ways to make the food cheaper that still goes to the restaurant and the driver still gets, but we're probably not going to, we don't get to impact the restaurant's prices anyway, but we would get to impact the platform's prices. So if we're taking 5%, are we really going to vote to bring it down to 4.5 when it's like, it's not that big of a difference. And we can see that you know what I mean? That we need this platform because it's going to this other stuff because it's spread out
money
again.
Is being used
it's not that much.
For Reason Score, right? Like if we're like, well, if we lower the prices, then they can afford it, but then we can't pay Reason Score, or we can't pay Wiki Election, or we can't, do this new project. But you also can't go too overboard. And I think that's where like a lot of it is sort of market pricing. Like with the Salesforce stuff, it would be making it a reasonable price, but still like in line with okay, well, if the competitors to this are charging 10,000, we can pretty, easily charge 2,000 or 3,000. And still, be way cheaper, but also
If we're selling to game A people, then
Yeah,
we just
true.
charge the market, right? But yeah, for our internal services, it'll be like there will be some points where we have to decide, okay, we're going to charge more than we have to on
Right.
this thing so that we can fund other things. And I guess that, like Jubilee said, that would be the decision of the community.
Yeah. And that, I think, will be a difficult conversation with the community, because it does have to be, hey, what price would you be willing to pay? P.S. It can't just be break even, or why are we doing this? We can't pay for any of the whole purpose of this thing. So there has to be profit, enough profit to keep everything running, but not enough profit that it's gouging you, or that, it's out of line with.
Yeah. And also for the internal stuff, I'd like to maybe consider taking into account game A dynamics. Like, so, I may pay more for the same product than Jubilee pays because I have a higher game A salary, and I understand the ethos, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's where it's not the project that I'm a little critical of like different prices for different people based on your hourly wage, because it's like if Bentley chooses to pay more because he has more money is very different than like, right, even if I'm making $80,000 a year, I'm good with paying $80,000 a year, but if I'm making $100 an hour, I can't work as much as other people. So that's not like you can't, anyway, that's that, like you can't exponentially increase, but because we're also with our members, we're having those conversations. Hopefully we're not blanket everyone who makes the X per hour is paying this and vice versa. It's like, wait, that doesn't work for us. It's like right now under COVID, Canada's great at giving its people money, but there's always someone who falls through the cracks. It's like, wait, why aren't people on disability making money? Why aren't the little businesses making it when, like, it works for 80%, but not for the 20%. And we want to make something that works for more and more and more people. But
yeah, figuring out those nuanced rules and guidelines will be one of the interesting things. Yeah,
Yep.
it is funny how many times there's laws. Like, my wife got tested for COVID, and the test didn't come back for 3 weeks. But 2 weeks in, they said, well, if you had a test, you can't come in until you get the results. And it's like, if it was positive, it's been 2 weeks. You would let me in if I hadn't gotten the test by now.
Right.
But you're not going to let me in because I got the test to get that. Like, that makes no sense. But when they were writing the rules, they didn't think through all those things.
yes, which is the broken part of having that. Like, we make decisions behind closed doors, then we have to sell them to you, as opposed to, hey, this is how, like, if we want to make honoring that there's diminishing rate of returns, the opposite of that. What is the
Exponential returns?
that like the more you make, the cheaper it is, right? That
Economies of scale.
Yeah,
economies of scale. Thank you. That, and so, like, right, if we're gonna make cereal, I know we're not making cereal, but like we're making cereal. If we made 10,000 boxes, it's this much per box. So you can't charge less than that. But are we willing to pay an extra 25 cents so there's profit? Yes. Okay. Are we willing to pay an extra double that? No. What we need to do is get more cereal. Who else wants cereal? Who doesn't know this is here? And then when we're at the peak market, we have all of our members at the maximum consumption of cereal. It doesn't make sense for them to earn more. Now, are we talking about increasing or decreasing the rate based on our own?
And I think that's where a part of it is around, like, how you drive the conversation, like with your talk about how MEC, they make all this cool stuff, but a lot of their members don't buy it because it's too expensive. Almost having that competition amongst yourselves. Like, okay, here's our cheapest possible item that, is still probably going to be more expensive than Walmart, but it's at least comparable. And it doesn't have all of our boxes ticked, but, it gets us 60% of the way there, and hopefully you'll actually buy this. And then, okay, if you are willing to buy the more expensive one, here's the other item. And so it's sort of like doing pricing like that, where you go and do all the research to, let's say, here's the cost for cereal, here's the amount per box if we were to just make one, and here's how we project the prices are going to change as we're able to make more, and then just offering options to the community, and not just being like, do you want to pay more or less? Obviously less. They're always going to pay less.
Yeah, unless there's a reason to pay more, right? So that we can get this. Like, I never understand how the organic things never make it in bulk. I'm like, you don't think people who, like, I want to buy a tiny salad dressing? No, I still eat the same amount of salad dressing as someone who doesn't eat organic. Like, I don't understand why. And it's not environmental to have a tiny bottle instead of anyway, family size one. So that we have that customer feedback because we are the customer. Like, how do we get our needs met?
So I think we reached our hour.
Definitely reached our hour. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next week back at the regular time. We're staying at the regular time, 9 a.m., which is the 5 hours, whatever before
Yeah.
this one.
Poor
All right.
Mateusz
Bye.
is super late for him.